Shen Yulan died believing she had been loved. Her last memory as a living woman was the faint warmth of afternoon sunlight slipping through the carved lattice window, dust motes drifting lazily in the air like they had nowhere else to be. The room smelled faintly of sandalwood and old paper. Familiar. Safe. The kind of smell that said home. Her breathing had grown shallow sometime before noon. She knew that much. The pain never came, which felt like a blessing. Just a gentle heaviness in her chest, as though she were sinking into a deep, warm bath. Voices hovered at the edge of her hearing. Servants murmured. Someone sniffled quietly. Her eldest son's voice broke when he called her mother. Yulan wanted to tell them not to cry. She wanted to say she'd lived well, that she had no regrets. She'd been a good wife. A good mother. A good matriarch to the Shen household. She had done everything she was supposed to do and more. Her husband, Guqing, sat by her bed. She couldn't see him clearly anymore, but she knew he was there. She could feel the weight of his presence like she had for decades. Steady. Dependable. Familiar to the point of invisibility. Qing had always been a quiet man. Gentle in his way. Not prone to sweet words, but he'd never raised his voice to her. Never humiliated her. He had accepted her strengths and her sharp edges with the same calm patience. When she managed the household accounts better than any steward, he let her. When she intervened to help his career with her family's influence, he accepted it with gratitude, or so she thought. In her fading consciousness, Yulan felt a swell of pride. She had chosen well. She had been blessed. It's all right, she tried to say, though no sound came out. Don't worry. The room dimmed. The voices blurred. Her body felt very far away. And then, just like that, the heaviness vanished. Yulan opened her eyes. She expected darkness. Or light. Or something holy and incomprehensible. Instead, she was standing beside her own bed. For a moment, confusion washed over her in a slow, gentle wave. The room looked the same, but sharper, like someone had polished the edges of reality. Colors were deeper. Sounds clearer. She could hear the soft rasp of her own breathing from the body lying on the bed. Her body. It looked small. Frail. Older than she remembered feeling. A strange calm settled over her. So this was death, then. She didn't feel afraid. Just detached. Curious. Like she was watching the end of a long play she'd memorized by heart. Her gaze drifted to Guqing. He was still seated by the bed, but his posture had changed. The careful stillness he'd worn for days slipped away the moment the physician bowed and whispered, "Madam Shen has passed." The room erupted in quiet grief. Her daughters knelt, sobbing into their sleeves. Servants dropped to their knees. Someone choked out a prayer. Guqing didn't move. Yulan waited for him to reach for her hand. To say her name. To look at her one last time. Instead, he stood up. He stepped back from the bed, as though the sight of her repulsed him. Yulan frowned, a ripple of unease stirring for the first time. Chang's face, usually so composed, twisted. Not with grief. Not with loss. With hatred. Pure, unfiltered hatred. Before she could even process it, he spat on the floor beside her bed. The sound was sharp. Obscene. Yulan froze. "What are you all crying for?" Guqing snapped. His voice was nothing like the one she remembered. Gone was the mildness. The restraint. What remained was bitterness so thick it seemed to curdle the air. She finally died. Shouldn't that be worth celebrating? The room went dead silent. Her children stared at him in disbelief. A servant gasped. Yulan felt as though someone had driven a blade straight through her chest. Except she had no chest anymore. No heart to shatter. And yet the pain was unbearable. Qing stepped closer to the bed, looming over her corpse. His eyes were red, but not with tears. "With that cold face of yours," he continued, voice trembling with rage, "you ruined my entire life." Yulan wanted to scream. She wanted to ask him what he meant. To tell him he must be confused, overtaken by grief. But he wasn't finished. "Do you know how disgusting it was?" he said, his lips curling. "Being trapped in a marriage I never wanted. Smiling at you every day. Pretending to be grateful while you used your family's power to shove me higher and higher. Do you know how it felt watching the woman I loved suffer because of you? Her world tilted. Loved, what did I ever do to you? Yulan thought wildly. What are you talking about? But the answers came anyway. Shower was gentle, Guqing went on, his voice softening when he spoke the name. She was kind. She never looked down on me. Unlike you. You and your precious Shen family. If it weren't for that forced engagement, she would have been my wife. She wouldn't have died alone, coughing blood in a broken house while I played the role of your loyal husband. Yulan stared at him, stunned. Su Qiao. The name surfaced from the depths of her memory. A vague figure. A girl from years ago. A commoner known for her beauty. She remembered hearing whispers, once. A passing rumor she'd dismissed without much thought. Qing had laughed it off back then, said people talked nonsense. She had believed him. She had always believed him. You stood in her way, he hissed, glaring down at Yulan's lifeless face. You lived comfortably while she suffered. And now you dare die peacefully? Don't worry. I won't let you rest. Her spirit shook. Qing turned away from the bed, barking orders. Prepare the funeral. Don't make it extravagant. Waste of money. Someone hesitated. Master Gu, Madame Shen she was nothing, he cut in sharply. When I die, I will not be buried beside her. I already have someone waiting for me. The finality in his tone struck like a hammer. Yulan felt herself unravel. She drifted backward as the servants hurried to obey, her mind racing, replaying decades of memories that now felt warped and false. Every shared meal. Every quiet night. Every polite smile. All a lie. Days passed, though time felt strange. Elastic. She watched her funeral as though from underwater. Her children wore mourning white. They knelt until their knees bled. They cried until their voices went hoarse. Guqing played the grieving widower flawlessly. He bowed at the right moments. Dabbed at his eyes. Accepted condolences with a bowed head and trembling hands. Yulan wanted to retch. After the mourning period ended, he wasted no time. She followed him to a remote hillside cemetery one overcast morning. No servants accompanied him. Only 2 hired laborers and a small, unmarked coffin. Inside it were Su Qiao's remains. Yulan watched in numb horror as Guqing personally oversaw the placement. He brushed dirt from the headstone with a tenderness she had never once received. His voice softened as he spoke to the grave, his hand lingering on the cold stone. Shower, he murmured, eyes shining. I'm sorry it took so long. You won't be alone anymore. He turned then, gesturing toward another tomb. Her tomb. From now on, he said quietly, you rest here. Beside me. But the tenderness vanished when he glanced at her name carved into stone. She doesn't deserve this place, he muttered. But it's too troublesome to move her now. Yulan felt something inside her snap. A soundless scream tore from her throat. Rage unlike anything she had ever known consumed her. It wasn't sharp or explosive. It was deep. Molten. Decades of devotion, obedience, and sacrifice curdled into something dark and poisonous. I gave you everything, she thought, shaking. My youth. My family. My loyalty. And this is how you repay me? The sky darkened. Clouds rolled overhead, heavy and oppressive. Yulan's spirit burned. The world seemed to answer her fury. A sudden force yanked at her, violent and unrelenting, as though unseen hands had seized her very soul. The cemetery dissolved. The sound of wind roared in her ears. Guqing's figure blurred, then vanished. As darkness swallowed her, a single thought echoed through her being, fierce and unwavering. If she were given another chance, she would never make the same mistake again. Never. And somewhere in the void, time began to turn backward. Shen Yulan woke up choking on air. Her body jerked upright as though dragged from deep water. Her chest heaved, lungs burning, fingers clutching at silk bedding that was far too smooth, far too new. She was alive. The realization hit her all at once, so violently it made her dizzy. She stared down at her hands. They were slender. Unlined. No age spots. No stiffness in the joints. Pale pink nails she hadn't seen in decades. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might shatter her ribs. This wasn't the Lin residence she'd died in. The room was brighter, fresher. Sunlight spilled freely through gauze curtains embroidered with plum blossoms. The furniture was lighter too, carved wood polished to a youthful shine. Everything smelled faintly of blooming incense and clean linen instead of medicine and decay. "No," she whispered hoarsely. "This isn't possible." She swung her legs off the bed. The movement was effortless. No weakness. No pain. Her feet touched the floor, cool and solid beneath her soles. A bronze mirror sat near the window. Her breath caught as she approached it, every step heavy with dread. Slowly, as though afraid the image might vanish if she moved too quickly, Shen Yulan lifted her gaze. A young woman stared back. She couldn't have been more than 17. Her cheeks were full, unmarked by time. Her eyes were bright, sharp, alive with an intelligence that hadn't yet learned to hide itself behind restraint. Long black hair cascaded down her back, partially braided, the rest loose in the fashion of an unmarried noble daughter. Her younger self. The same face Guqing had first smiled at politely. The same face he'd learned to resent. Her knees buckled. Yulan collapsed onto the edge of the bed, gripping the fabric so tightly her knuckles went white. Her mind spun, memories crashing into one another. The cemetery. His words. His hatred. The way he'd said another woman's name with reverence. This wasn't a dream. Dreams didn't feel like this. They didn't leave her chest aching with unfinished fury. A sharp knock sounded at the door. "Miss," a young maid's voice called cheerfully. "Are you awake? Madam says you must get ready quickly. The Gu family will arrive before noon." Yulan's blood ran cold. The Gu family. Her fingers trembled. This was it. The day everything began. The day her life had quietly, irrevocably veered off course the first time. The engagement meeting. Memories flooded back with cruel clarity. She remembered sitting demurely beside her mother, head bowed, listening as her elders discussed her future like it was a settled matter. She remembered Gu Cheng's polite nods, his composed expression. She remembered feeling a shy sense of pride when others praised his talent and humility. She remembered thinking she was lucky. Yulan laughed softly, the sound brittle and sharp in the quiet room. "Lucky. Come in," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. The maid pushed the door open and hurried in, arms full of garments. She was familiar. Young. Unaware of anything beyond the simple joy of serving her mistress. "Miss, you overslept a little. Madam was worried you might be nervous." Yulan met her eyes and felt a sudden surge of tenderness. This girl had cried at her funeral too. "I'm fine," Yulan said. "Help me dress." As the maid worked, Yulan's thoughts raced. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to observe, to think. Rage alone wouldn't save her this time. She'd had a lifetime of obedience. A lifetime of silence. It had led her straight into a grave. Not again. The door opened once more, and her mother stepped in. Madame Shen looked exactly as Yulan remembered. Elegant. Sharp-eyed. A woman who had navigated court politics with grace and calculation. She studied Yulan carefully, her expression softening when she saw her daughter's calm face. "You look composed," Madame Shen said. "That's good. The Gu family is a respectable household. Guqing has real potential. This engagement will benefit you both." Yulan lowered her gaze, hiding the flicker of irony in her eyes. Potential. Yes. He had plenty of that. Fed by her family's blood and bones. "Mother," Yulan said gently, "what if I don't want this engagement?" Madame Shen paused. The maid froze, eyes wide. "What nonsense are you saying?" her mother asked, though there was curiosity beneath the rebuke. "This matter was discussed long ago." Yulan lifted her head. Her expression was serene, but her eyes burned with something new. "If I'm to marry, shouldn't it be to someone who wants me?" Her mother frowned. "Guqing is an upright man." "Is he?" Yulan asked quietly. Before Madame Shen could respond, another servant announced the Gu family's arrival. There was no more time. Yulan stood as they entered the main hall. Guqing walked at the front, dressed in scholar's robes, his posture humble, his expression respectful. He looked exactly as she remembered. Clean. controlled. Perfectly harmless. Her stomach churned. He met her gaze briefly, then looked away, the picture of propriety. Liar. The elders exchanged greetings. Tea was poured. Polite conversation filled the room, smooth and practiced. Yulan listened in silence as they praised Gu Cheng's studies, his character, his gratitude for the Shen family's consideration. Each word felt like a slap. She waited. When the conversation finally turned to the formal proposal, Yulan rose to her feet. The room stilled. Madame Shen turned sharply. Yulan? Yulan bowed once, deeply, then straightened. Her voice carried clearly through the hall. I refuse this engagement. Gasps rippled through the room. Gu Cheng's head snapped up. For the first time, his composure cracked. His eyes widened, just for a heartbeat. Miss Shen, he began, clearly unprepared. If I'd done something to offend you have, Yulan said calmly. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. She turned to face the elders, her expression respectful but unyielding. I cannot marry a man who already belongs to another. Confusion erupted. What do you mean? Someone demanded. Gu Cheng went pale. That's absurd. Is it? Yulan tilted her head slightly, studying him the way one might examine an insect. Then perhaps you can explain Su Qiao. The name landed like thunder. Gu Cheng's face drained of color. A murmur swept through the hall. Madame Shen stiffened. Yulan continued, her voice steady, every word sharpened by memory. The tofu seller's daughter from the West Market. The one you've been secretly supporting for years. The one you visit under the pretense of late-night study sessions. This is slander. Gu Cheng shouted, his control shattering. I've never enough, Madame Shen said coldly. Yulan looked at Gu Cheng one last time. He stared back at her, panic flashing beneath his outrage. For the first time, she saw him clearly. Not as a husband. Not as a partner. But as a man who had always planned to use her. In my previous life, she thought, I swallowed everything you threw at me. Not this time. I wish you happiness, Yulan said softly. Just not at my expense. She bowed again, deeper this time. The engagement was over. And as the Gu family left in disgrace, Shen Yulan felt something she hadn't felt in 2 lifetimes. Freedom. The Shen residence did not erupt into chaos after the Gu family left. That surprised Yulan. In her memories, any disruption to decorum had always carried consequences. Raised voices, harsh judgments, days of tense silence. But this time, the house settled into something heavy and watchful instead, like a beast lowering itself to assess a threat. Yulan remained kneeling long after the door closed behind Gu Cheng's retreating figure. The scent of tea had gone bitter. No one spoke. She kept her eyes lowered, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. It wasn't submission. It was patience. At last, Madame Shen exhaled slowly. Stand up, her mother said. Yulan obeyed. Madame Shen studied her daughter with an intensity that made servants instinctively withdraw to the edges of the hall. You accused a man of impropriety in front of 2 families. Do you understand what you've done? Yes, Yulan replied. Then explain yourself. Yulan lifted her gaze. There was no defiance in her eyes, only clarity. Gu Cheng has been keeping a woman named Su Qiao in the West Market for 3 years. He provides her monthly expenses. He visits her under cover of night. Several vendors know of her and call her the tofu beauty. A beat of silence. Madame Shen's expression did not change, but something sharpened behind her eyes. How do you know this? Yulan had prepared for this question. In a dream, she said calmly. One of the elders scoffed. Absurd. I don't expect you to believe me, Yulan said evenly. But the truth will surface soon enough. Gu Cheng is careful, but not careful enough. His pride will betray him. Madame Shen considered her for a long moment. Then she dismissed everyone else with a gesture. When the hall emptied, she turned back to Yulan. You were always observant. But today, you were ruthless. Yulan didn't flinch. I learned from you. Her mother's lips twitched despite herself. You've changed, Madame Shen said quietly. Yulan almost smiled. That evening, alone in her chambers, Yulan finally allowed herself to sit. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind exhaustion that sank into her bones. She stared out the window at the courtyard below, where lanterns swayed gently in the evening breeze. In her past life, this was where she would have cried. She would have questioned herself. Wondered if she'd gone too far. If she'd ruined her own future. Now, she felt only a strange, aching emptiness. She thought of Gu Cheng's face at the funeral. The way his hatred had been naked and unashamed. The way he had said another woman's name like a prayer. The memory steadied her. "You don't get to use me again," she whispered. Her gaze drifted inward, sifting through memories she'd once dismissed as insignificant. Small moments that had never made sense before. The way Gu Cheng had always avoided intimacy. The nights he'd returned home smelling faintly of tofu and cheap incense. The excuses. The distance. She'd mistaken restraint for virtue. The thought made her jaw tighten. Yulan rang the bell beside her bed. Two figures entered quietly. Ming and Fan. Ming was older, steady, with eyes that missed very little. Fan was younger, quick, her expressions always dancing just ahead of her thoughts. They had served Yulan faithfully since she was a girl. In her previous life, they had stayed with her until the end. "You called, miss?" Ming asked. Yulan gestured for them to sit. "I need you to listen carefully. What I say next cannot leave this room." They both stiffened, then nodded. "There will be rumors," Yulan said. "About Gu Cheng. About a woman named Su Qiao. I want to know everything. Where she lives. Who visits her. Who talks about her." Fan's eyes widened. "Miss, are you asking us to listen?" Yulan corrected gently. "Nothing more. People talk freely when they think no one important is paying attention." Ming inclined her head. "It will be done." After they left, Yulan lay back and closed her eyes. Sleep did not come easily. Her dreams were filled with echoes. Two lives overlapping. Scenes blurring together until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. In one, she sat beside Gu Cheng in silence. In the other, she stood alone, watching him walk away. When morning came, she rose with the sun. Over the next few days, the truth crept outward like ink soaking into paper. A vendor mentioned Gu Cheng's frequent visits to the West Market. A neighbor spoke of the scholar who paid rent for a delicate girl with a cough. Someone else laughed and called her lucky, being kept by a future official. The name Su Qiao traveled quickly. The Gu household tried to suppress it. Too late. Madame Shen listened to the reports in silence, her expression growing colder by the day. "So it's true," she said finally. Yulan nodded. "It always was." Madame Shen leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "Your refusal saved us a great deal of trouble." Yulan felt a small, unfamiliar warmth bloom in her chest. That night, she sat at her writing desk and burned a bundle of old letters. Invitations. Introductions. Threads that once tied her future to Gu Cheng's ambitions. As the paper curled and blackened, she felt lighter. "I won't push him forward anymore," she thought. "Let him walk on his own. If he stumbled, that would be his fate." Outside, the wind shifted. And somewhere in the city, Gu Cheng felt the ground begin to crumble beneath his feet, though he didn't yet know why. Gu Cheng did not give up easily. Yulan had expected as much. Men like him never did. They mistook opportunity for destiny and believed the world owed them recompense for their patience. Even after the engagement collapsed and whispers began to coil around his name, Gu Cheng continued to act as though the future still belonged to him. He sent letters. The first was polite, almost wounded. He wrote of misunderstandings and rash words, of the dangers of listening to rumors. He praised Yulan's intelligence, her generosity, her discernment. She didn't open it. The second arrived 2 days later, heavier with implication. He reminded her, gently, of how their union would benefit them both. Of how difficult the world was for a man without backing. Of how much he admired her foresight. She burned it. By the fifth letter, his tone shifted. He apologized. Yulan held the thin paper between her fingers, recognizing the careful phrasing. This was how he'd always been. Soft when it suited him. Earnest when cornered. Never sincere. In her past life, this was where she would have relented. Told herself compassion was strength. That helping him succeed made her noble. She folded the letter neatly and fed it to the brazier. Ash drifted upward, faint and gray. He's afraid, Fan reported later that evening, her voice low with excitement. The Gu family's gates have been closed for days. His father's temper is legendary. Yulan nodded, fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. And Su Qiao? She's still in the West Market. Still seeing him. Of course she was. Yulan stared into her tea, watching the surface ripple. He won't let her go. Not yet. She's his weakness. Ming hesitated. Miss, forgive my boldness, but what do you intend to do? Yulan looked up. For a moment, her reflection in Ming's eyes startled her. She looked calm. Collected. Nothing like the woman whose spirit had screamed into the void. I intend to let the truth introduce itself, she said softly. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. 3 nights later, a fire broke out in the West Market. It started small. A cooking accident, they said. A tipped oil lamp. The kind of thing that happened all the time in cramped wooden homes. But fire had a way of drawing attention. Yulan heard about it just after dusk. She was sitting by the window, brushing her hair, when Fan burst into the room, breathless. Miss. There's a fire near Su Qiao's house. Yulan's hand stilled. She set the brush down carefully. Send word to the night patrol. Quietly. Make sure the Gu family hears about it. Fan's eyes sparkled. Yes, Mississippi. By the time Yulan arrived at the edge of the market, a crowd had already gathered. Flames licked greedily at the eaves of a narrow house, smoke billowing into the sky. Buckets were passed from hand to hand. Shouts echoed through the street. And there he was. Gu Qing stood just outside the cordon, his hair disheveled, robes hastily thrown on. He was shouting Su Qiao's name, panic raw and unguarded in his voice. Yulan watched from the shadows. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the scorched beams and falling ash. When he reached the doorway, Su Qiao stumbled out coughing, her clothes rumpled, her hair loose. He grabbed her. Not like a concerned benefactor. Like a man terrified of losing what he believed belonged to him. Are you hurt? He demanded, hands roaming her arms, her shoulders. She leaned into him, clinging. I thought I would die, she sobbed. The crowd stared. Whispers rippled. Yulan felt no triumph. Only a quiet sense of inevitability. Moments later, the Gu family arrived. Gu Qing's father took in the scene in a single glance. His face darkened. What is the meaning of this? Gu Qing froze. Su Qiao realized where she was and tried to step back, but it was too late. Her sleeve was still clutched in Gu Qing's hand. Her hair was unbound. Her face bare of propriety. I can explain, Gu Qing said desperately. His mother let out a sharp laugh. Explain what? That you risked your reputation for a market girl? The crowd leaned in. Yulan stepped forward then, just enough to be seen. Gu Qing's eyes found her. For a split second, relief flashed across his face. As though he believed she had come to save him. She met his gaze and let him see nothing. I was passing by, Yulan said calmly to no one in particular. I heard there was a fire. Her presence shifted the atmosphere instantly. Murmurs grew louder. Eyes darted between her and the scene unfolding before them. Gu Qing's father followed their gazes, his expression turning thunderous. So this is the woman, he said coldly. Su Qiao shrank back, trembling. Gu Qing opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The fire was extinguished soon after, but the damage was done. By morning, the story had spread through the city. The scholar Gu Qing, exposed at a fire, entangled with his secret lover. The Shen family's rejected son-in-law. The tofu beauty. Yulan returned home before dawn. She washed the smoke from her hair and sat quietly as the sky lightened. Her hands were steady. This wasn't cruelty, she told herself. This was truth, dragged into the light. And once seen, it could never be unseen. Somewhere across the city, Gu Qing knelt before his parents, his future collapsing around him. Yulan closed her eyes. The web was tightening. Lord Shen returned 3 days after the fire. The gates of the Shen residence opened at dawn, banners lifting in the morning wind as the escort rode in. Horses stamped and snorted, armor clinked softly, and servants hurried forward in a practiced flurry. News of his success had arrived ahead of him, carried by messengers who spoke of a clean victory and imperial praise. In her previous life, Yulan had greeted her father with relief. With gratitude that he had come back alive. This time, she felt something deeper. Safer. She stood in the front courtyard, hands folded, watching as he dismounted. Lord Shen was taller than she remembered him being in her memories, his posture straight despite the long journey. His hair was threaded with gray now, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "Father," she said, bowing. He studied her for a moment before returning the gesture. "You've grown." The simple words caught in her chest. Inside, once the dust of travel had been washed away and tea poured, Madame Shen spoke of what had happened. She did not soften the story. She spoke plainly. Of the broken engagement. Of Gu Cheng's hidden lover. Of the fire. Lord Shen listened without interruption. Yulan waited. When her mother finished, silence settled over the room. Lord Shen's gaze shifted to his daughter. "Did you know?" he asked. "Yes," Yulan said. "How long?" "Long enough." He nodded slowly. "And you chose to expose him?" "I chose not to protect him." Something like approval flickered in his eyes. "Well done," he said simply. Yulan blinked. In her past life, she'd spent decades wondering if she'd ever disappointed him. Wondering if she'd done enough. Hearing those words now, so easily given, felt like a wound closing. Lord Shen set his teacup down. Gu Cheng was ambitious but weak. A man who can't manage his own desires will never manage power well. Madame Shen glanced at Yulan. "There is another matter." She spoke of Gu family's half-brother. Gu Liwei. He was legitimate. Capable. Quietly competent. Where Gu Cheng grasped, Liwei calculated. He had already distanced himself from the scandal. An alliance could be considered, Madame Shen said carefully. It would stabilize matters. Yulan stiffened. Marriage. Even the word made something inside her recoil. Lord Shen noticed. "What do you think?" Yulan took a breath. "I think I'm tired of being discussed as a solution." The room went still. She met her father's gaze, heart pounding. "I don't doubt his capability. But I won't enter another engagement built on convenience. I want time." Lord Shen studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You will have it." Madame Shen's brows lifted slightly, but she didn't object. That night, Yulan walked the inner courtyard alone. The air smelled of wet earth and night-blooming flowers. Lantern light pooled softly along the path. Ming and Fan trailed a respectful distance behind her. "I thought they'd argue," Fan whispered. "So did I," Yulan admitted. She stopped near the pond, watching koi ripple the water surface. "I spent my last life proving myself useful. This time, I want to be myself." Ming smiled faintly. "You already are." Yulan felt warmth spread through her chest. Later, she wrote a list. Names of servants who had stayed loyal. Accounts she would personally review. Properties she intended to reclaim control over. Small, quiet acts of independence. Across the city, Gu Cheng's fate was being negotiated without him. But here, within these walls, Yulan began something else entirely. Not revenge. A life that belonged to her. The Gu family moved quickly once scandal hardened into certainty. Within a week, the whispers had reached a pitch that could no longer be ignored. Doors closed where Gu Cheng once found polite welcome. Invitations dried up. His name, spoken aloud, now came with a pause. A judgment. So they chose the only solution left to them. Marriage. Yulan learned of it over breakfast. Fan burst into the room with news she could barely contain. "They've set a date," she said, breathless. "Gu Cheng and Su Qiao. The elders are saying it'll quiet everything." Yulan lifted her teacup, hand steady. "It won't." Fan blinked. "No?" "People don't forget what entertains them," Yulan said softly. "They only wait for the next spectacle." She wasn't wrong. The wedding was hurried, stripped of ceremony and pride. No grand procession. No music that carried beyond the street. Su Qiao entered the Gu household through the side gate, her red veil trembling in the wind. Yulan imagined it clearly. The bitterness beneath the silk. The knowledge that this marriage was not triumph but containment. She felt no satisfaction. Only distance. Reports filtered in regardless. Guqing drank more. He quarreled with his parents. Su Qiao cried often. The household simmered with resentment. He wanted her, Fan said one evening, confusion lacing her voice. Why is he unhappy now? Yulan considered that. He didn't want a wife. He wanted an excuse. At the same time, Gu Liwei began appearing with increasing frequency. He never arrived unannounced. Always formally invited. Always impeccably mannered. He spoke little, listened more. His eyes missed nothing. Yulan found him exhausting. They sat across from each other one afternoon in the garden, a stone table between them. Tea cooled untouched. I admire your decisiveness, Gu Liwei said at last. Many women would have endured quietly. Yulan met his gaze. Many men mistake endurance for virtue. A faint smile touched his lips. I won't deny that an alliance would benefit us both. There it was. Yulan leaned back slightly. And if it didn't? His eyes flickered. Then I wouldn't be here. She nodded. Thank you for your honesty. He studied her, then spoke again. You don't trust me. I don't trust anyone who approaches me as a strategy, Yulan replied. Silence stretched between them. I don't intend to marry, she added. Saying it aloud felt like drawing a clean line through the earth. Not now. Perhaps not ever. Gu Liwei exhaled slowly. That's a dangerous stance. So is believing safety comes from attachment. He didn't argue. When he left, Yulan felt lighter, though she knew she'd closed a door that would not open again easily. That evening, she sat with Ming and Fan, reviewing household matters. She listened. Asked questions. Made decisions. These were small things. Quiet things. But they were hers. Somewhere across the city, Guqing lay awake beside the woman he'd once sworn he loved, realizing too late that desire didn't equal freedom. And Yulan, for the first time in either life, slept without dreaming of him. The results of the provincial examinations were posted on a clear autumn morning. The city woke early that day. Scholars in worn robes crowded the streets long before dawn, clutching prayer beads and ink-stained charms. Families waited at a distance, pretending calm while their eyes betrayed them. Hope hung thick in the air, fragile and electric. Yulan hadn't planned to go. She only found herself there because her younger brother, Shen Ziyu, had returned from the border the night before, armor still dusted with road grime and victory. He had laughed when she told him of the commotion. Come, he'd said. Let's see how many dreams survive the day. So she went, standing slightly apart from the crush, her cloak drawn close, her posture relaxed. She wasn't looking for Guqing. He found her anyway. She felt his gaze before she saw him. That familiar prickle between her shoulders. When she turned, he was standing several paces away, thinner than she remembered, his scholar's robes hanging loosely from his frame. His name was there. Near the top. A murmur spread through the crowd. Congratulations followed. Hands clapped his back. For a moment, he looked almost whole again. Then Su Qiao appeared. She pushed through the gathered people, her face pale, her eyes rimmed red. She looked nothing like the gentle beauty whispered about in tea-houses. She looked desperate. You came, she said sharply, staring at Yulan. The surrounding voices dimmed, curiosity sharpening. Yulan frowned. Excuse me? Su Qiao's laugh was brittle. Don't pretend. You never stopped wanting him. Now that he's passed, you think you can steal him back. A hush fell. Guqing turned, horror flashing across his face. Qiaoer, stop. But she was past stopping. You think you're better than me, Su Qiao went on, voice rising. You think money makes you pure. You ruined us once already. You won't do it again. Yulan felt Shen Ziyu stiffen beside her. She stepped forward calmly. I've never written your husband a single letter, Yulan said, her voice carrying. I never answered his. I rejected him publicly. What exactly am I stealing? Su Qiao faltered. Yulan turned slightly, addressing the crowd. I came today to celebrate my brother's return from the border. His victory earned imperial recognition. Shen Ziyu inclined his head, bemused. Yulan looked back at Guqing then. He couldn't meet her eyes. If success tempts a man to imagine ghosts, she said softly, that isn't my doing. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Su Qiao's face crumpled. She looked at Gu Qing, searching for rescue. He said nothing. That silence broke something between them. By the time the crowd dispersed, Gu Qing stood alone. Yulan didn't look back. For the first time, she truly felt finished with him. Gu Qing began to unravel after the palace examinations. No one noticed at first. Or perhaps they chose not to. There was comfort in believing that brilliance excused oddness, that exhaustion could explain anything. Scholars broke under pressure all the time. It was practically expected. But Gu Qing's performance before the emperor was not merely poor. It was disastrous. He spoke out of order. Misquoted passages he had once recited flawlessly. When questioned on governance, he veered into rambling anecdotes that led nowhere. At one point, he laughed. Loudly. Alone. The examiners exchanged uneasy glances. By the time he was dismissed, sweat soaked through his robes and his hands shook uncontrollably. He did not remember leaving the hall. What he remembered, over and over, was a different life. One where he sat at the head of a household warmed by wealth that was not his. One where Shen Yulan arranged everything quietly behind him. Where doors opened before he even knew to knock. The contrast hollowed him out. At home, Su Qiao watched him with growing fear. He paced through the nights, muttering to himself. He accused servants of stealing letters that had never existed. He woke screaming her name, then shoved her away when she tried to comfort him. You don't belong here, he snapped one night. This isn't how it was supposed to be. She stared at him, tears streaking her cheeks. Then why did you marry me? He didn't answer. Instead, he began to talk to people who weren't there. He argued with Yulan in empty rooms. Begged her forgiveness. Raged at her imagined silence. He insisted they were still married, that everything had gone wrong only because someone had interfered. His parents tried to contain it. They locked doors. Sent servants away. Whispered of illness. But madness has a way of spilling through cracks. One afternoon, he burst into the courtyard, laughing wildly, declaring himself top scholar. He bowed to invisible officials. He scolded Su Qiao for improper dress in front of guests who did not exist. By then, even the Gu family could no longer pretend. And somewhere far away, Shen Yulan felt nothing at all. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Only relief that she was no longer bound to the ruins of his mind. Gu Qing escaped the Gu residence at dawn. No one knew how he managed it. Later, servants would argue over whose watch it had been, whose fault it was that the side gate had been left unbarred. By the time the household realized he was gone, the city had already swallowed him whole. He walked with a wild certainty, hair unbound, shoes half-fastened, robe stained with dirt. People stared as he passed. Some recognized him. Some whispered. Most stepped aside instinctively, sensing the wrongness clinging to him like damp air. I'm late, he muttered. She's waiting. In his mind, Shen Yulan still lived behind tall red gates. Still sat at her desk at dawn, correcting accounts, smoothing the path he walked without ever thanking her for it. In his mind, everything could still be fixed if he just explained properly. He reached the Shen residence before noon. The guards crossed their spears immediately. Stop, one ordered. State your business. Gu Qing laughed. Don't you recognize me? I'm her husband. The guards exchanged looks. Pity flickered across one face. Alarm across the other. Inside, Yulan was reviewing documents when the commotion reached her. The voices were distant, distorted, like sound traveling through water. Miss, Ming said carefully, there's a man at the gate. Yulan already knew. She set her brush down. Her hand didn't shake. Handle it, she said. I won't see him. Outside, Gu Qing raged when he was denied entry. He shouted her name until his voice cracked. He pounded on the gates with bloodied fists, insisting she was his wife, that this was all a misunderstanding. The guards dragged him away. It was over quickly. Efficiently. Like removing a piece of broken furniture no one wanted to acknowledge anymore. That night, the Gu family retrieved him in silence. 2 days later, the rumors began. They said Gu Qing had wandered into an abandoned courtyard belonging to a distant branch of the family. They said he'd fallen into a dry well that had been sealed for years. They said no one heard him scream. When they pulled him out, his leg was twisted at an impossible angle. He survived. But survival was a narrow thing. He could no longer walk without assistance. His mind never cleared. Some days he stared at nothing, lips moving soundlessly. Other days he wept, begging forgiveness from people who weren't there. The Gu family announced he would be kept out of public view for reasons of health. No one questioned it. In the Shen residence, Yulan heard the news without comment. She nodded once and returned to her work. That night, she stood by the window longer than usual, watching lanterns sway in the distance. This is where you end, she thought, without hatred. Not with grandeur. Not with vindication. Just, small. And finally, far away. The morning air smelled of rain-soaked earth and fresh blossoms. Shen Yulan stood on the terrace, hands resting lightly on the carved railing, eyes tracing the patterns of sunlight filtering through the trees. The city below hummed with life, the merchants hawking wares, children laughing as they ran barefoot along the streets, the distant clatter of horse hooves on stone. It was ordinary, and yet it felt like a luxury she had never truly known until now. For a long moment, she simply breathed, letting the breeze wash over her. No letters. No schemes. No demands from anyone who believed they could control her future. Her past, the gilded cage of marriage, the carefully calculated alliances, the betrayals, was gone. Only the present remained, and with it, possibility. Shen Ziyu approached, still in his military uniform, polished and gleaming despite the journey he'd taken the day before. His face carried the calm satisfaction of a man who had done well and returned home. He paused at the terrace, watching her. "You look different," he said, a small smile playing at his lips. "Stronger." Yulan let herself smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "I feel different," she admitted. "I don't have to be the person I was anymore." He inclined his head. "The court will reward your discretion," he said. "Your name is clear. Your family's honor is intact." "I didn't do it for honor," she said softly. "I did it for myself." The words felt heavy with truth, each one shedding the weight of decades she'd carried. She had spent one lifetime living for everyone else, her family, her husband, her society. She had obeyed, sacrificed, smiled when it was demanded, mourned when it was convenient. Now, she realized that life had never been hers. And yet, she hadn't truly lived until this moment. Ming and Fan appeared quietly behind her, carrying tea and incense. Their eyes were bright, reflecting admiration, loyalty, and relief. They had survived the storms alongside her, and now, together, they would navigate calmer waters. Yulan accepted the tea with a gentle nod. "We have work to do," she said, voice calm but decisive. "I want the household to run smoothly, the servants protected, the accounts secured. Everything I build from here on, I build on my own terms." Fan's lips curved into a smile. "It will be done, Mississippi. Always." She turned back to the city below, watching life continue its steady rhythm. In the distance, she imagined the ruins of Gu Cheng's ambitions, the broken man who had once claimed to love her, now reduced to shadows of his former self. She felt a fleeting ripple of satisfaction, but not the kind that would chain her heart to resentment. She had avenged herself, yes, but she was not revenge. She was free. Her gaze swept to her family, her brother smiling from across the courtyard, his triumph recognized by the emperor himself. Their future was secure, their name untarnished. And she would not trade it for a gilded cage, even if it were lined with gold. That afternoon, she walked through the garden, feeling the sunlight warm her face. She paused by the koi pond, watching the water ripple with gentle patterns. It was ordinary, yet perfect in its simplicity. For the first time, she could admit that perfection was not in wealth, power, or social standing. It was in having the freedom to live by her own choice, to shape her own life without fear, without manipulation, without betrayal. She bent down, letting her fingers skim the water, and thought of the woman she had once been, the obedient daughter, the trusting wife, the matriarch who had died betrayed. That woman felt like a stranger now. Yulan had learned from her mistakes, and she had learned well. She would never be a pawn again. She would never surrender her heart, her mind, or her will. Night fell, and lanterns flickered in the garden, casting soft light over the paths. Shen Yulan stood at the edge of the terrace again, feeling the gentle wind and listening to the distant rhythm of life. For the first time, there was no shadow hanging over her, no threat to her peace. She had navigated the chaos, the lies, the games of power, and emerged intact. Stronger. Free. And in that freedom, she smiled not the polite, measured smile of a woman constrained by duty, but the quiet, serene smile of someone who had finally claimed her life. It was hers. Completely. And she would live it however she chose.